Now, coming back to the factors of stress and sleep and all these factors and cortisol, just understand, people always talk about, kind of demonize cortisol a little bit that way. But I want people to understand that cortisol is a normal hormone, one of our hormones we need on a daily basis. It's essential. It has a rhythm. We all know that. It peaks in the morning, comes through the night that way. And that's why I don't understand intermittent fasting, even though I don't like that term. I don't understand time restricted eating due to the fact that if you look at the digestibility, it's called a DIA score, and all the factors of when you get the most out of your food. That means if you ate the exact meal in the morning and exact meal at night and everything's perfect, do you know that you get more availability and more digestion and more nutrients out of that morning meal?
Yeah.
And because think about it this way, cortisol is elevated, and also people don't realize, and you always hear that cortisol is a fat storage hormone. Well, that's taken out of context, because by nature, your cortisol elevates, that actually circulates certain fatty acids and things like that, and they're wrong. That's why people realize under high stress, you have a little better time mobilizing fat because cortisol gets so elevated. But here's what happens. So I tell people say cortisol is a fat storage hormone. I'm like, really? Then what happens when people get really stressed and they get really skinny? They don't want to talk about true metabolism. But what does do is cortisol mobilizes it. It really does. It mobilizes your fat. And that's why a lot of times a woman can just move fat around from one area of the body to another based on her cortisol levels. But here's the part that I tell people that is so vitally important. And I figured this out because of my own personal story, not in my health, but my wife's health. She was extremely sick. And she had major, give you an example, endometriosis, ulcerative colitis, cystic acne, and cluster headaches. And she was told she could never have children. She wasn't ovulating. Totally understand. All the wonderful medical people that were working with her before I met her, they cared very deeply to help her. But they said, listen, you can't have babies, all the thing. I'm just synopsing that in the short term. But the idea is this, is I start to look and go, okay, endometriosis has some form of endocrine, contribution. So I started to look at all of the things and realize that the doctors who tested her were incomplete. Their analysis and viewpoint of her body was incomplete. And then I realized, as I was kind of, because even in chiropractic school, we're taught a lot about hormones and just the basic biochemistry and physiology, just like most doctors are. But here's what I noticed, but they don't teach this in detail. And all of a sudden I sat there and said, listen, it's very common for estrogens to get too elevated and progesterone to go too low. But why? You see, that's the one thing. Your body's always trying to adapt to be normal. And then I realized that there was a conversion, just we talk about conversion of hormones in adipose tissue. There's conversions based on a person's need. And cortisol actually can be converted from progesterone. And I was like, hold the phone. That means elevated things that cause cortisol to go up, mental stress, sugar levels, infections, chronic inflammation, joint issues, all the things like these things, anything that really stresses a woman's body out can cause a depletion of one of those major hormones that are meant to dictate their life. And I was like, so I started to search. I go, does that happen to guys? No. Testosterone doesn't have a direct connection as the way progesterone does. And I started to go, that means that women, just by their biochemistry, so I just taught you a simple biochemistry lesson, are going to be more susceptible to damage from the stressors than males are. I'm not saying that they don't have things that affect them negatively from stresses. I'm just saying that if you look at this, ladies, you could have had a bad mental thing happen to you, a divorce, a bad day, anything, and you can skip and delay your period or even throw off the timing. Mm-hmm. You know what's really funny? A man stresses out, has very high mental stress. He can tell you broke his toe that day, work sucked, and he still wants to have sex that night because the stress. You all laugh about this, but these are. And you say, how is that possible? Because if a woman gets stressed out, her panties are basically super glued to her. Yet a guy, but the idea, and it's okay. And see, I'm a guy recognizing now. Remember, now here's why I just put 1 and 2 together. I said, well, by nature, being a guy, we want sex a lot. Well, the last thing that you got to get you want introduced in your wife's life is what? Stress.
Right.
Mental, physical, chemical. So therefore, because essentially we get married for 2 reasons. Number 1, build a bit of family. 2, have sex more readily available. And
Yes.
so I'm sitting there going, as a husband, I'm going to want to do that on a regular basis. So therefore, I don't want my wife stressed out.
Yes.
And
It's
women
so
said,
simple.
preach it, doc. And guys are like, good point.
It's so simple. It's when I would do a new patient intake, I would always ask about libido and sleep. And if they told me, I mean, they could have had the worst symptom profile overall. If they told me their libido, and male or female, if they told me their libido was intact and good and their sleep was good, I was like, oh, this is going to be easy. And if their libido was tanked out and their sleep was off, it was going to be much, much more challenging. That's just what I have found clinically. And it definitely, if it's a man, if a man doesn't want to have sex every day, I'm very concerned. Clinically,
Yeah.
I really start digging in, like what's going on here, what's happening, because that's just like biology 101, and we want to, as human, we're so funny as humans. Like we have so lost the rules of biology, and we think that we're somehow above them. I mean, it was the same thing with the past few years. Like we thought we could hide out against a upper respiratory virus. It's so wild to me that we think we can usurp these things when we're just fancy mammals with opposable thumbs, like same rules,
Yep.
And yes,
Well,
I so agree. Like keep your wives as stress-free as possible. I tell my husband that all the time. My husband we have a very healthy sex life. And I'm like, dude, not stress me out.